Good morning, everyone. This is Doug. I'm going to do a commentary on 1 Timothy 4:4, what it implicates. Now that we have an NIV ESV translator, Bill Mounsey, unwittingly proving Paul says or means the word here, nothing is unclean for food. Okay. Now I'm going to read you the whole quote from Mr. Mounsey, but I just want you to know I put the word as food in here because if you read all the verses subsequent, it's about food. So to make it clear what Paul's talking about, I added that there. But listen to the verse now with Mr. Mounsey. This is his translation, Mounsey NT in Logos. And it's the first time I've ever seen it was this yesterday. So I'm now doing a video about this. This is how it reads. All of God's creation is good as food. That's my addition. And nothing is unclean if it is received with thanksgiving. And I'll read you the rest of the context and you realize it's about food. So that means Paul has clearly declared without any doubt, all foods are clean. No more is there any unclean food. Okay, so Paul has crossed the line. And that is a line that is very specifically set forth in Deuteronomy 13:1-10, that you cannot, not even Paul, not even Jesus, can take a law that was said in the Torah to be everlasting for all generations. You can't abrogate it. Jesus himself said the law, not the law and the prophets will not go. The law will not go away until the heavens and earth pass away. So there's no possibility that Jesus ever abrogated the food laws. And we've discussed the controversy over Mark 7, verse 19, and that I disposed of recently because the Syriac Sinaiticus just wipes out the problems that cause certain translators to make up 5 extra words in the NIV to tell you by saying this Jesus declared, those 5 words don't exist. And it simply was that when you eat the food and you digest it in your stomach, it goes out and is purged of dirt, filth, when that happens. That's all that was about. So anyway, getting back to this. So this was something I was just listening to one of Mr. Mounsey's episodes on participles of all things. Let me show you this. It's an episode called When Translating Participles with ING is Not Enough. I'm sure that's a riveting topic for the rest of you, but when he started to show his translation was unclean, I go, whoa, where is this coming from? So let me read you Bill's biography. Bill is the founder and president of biblicaltraining.org. By the way, I have an episode explaining why it's a good thing for you to train with him. He's got excellent presentation that's not too expensive to learn. I think it was $79, and then if you buy the book that goes with it, it's about $99. So it's worth its weight in gold, if you ask me. And he's very congenial and very easy to listen to. He serves on the Committee for Bible Translation, which is responsible for the NIV translation of the Bible. He was the New Testament chair for the ESV, that's the English Standard Version, very popular current version, and has written the best-selling biblical Greek textbook, Basics of Biblical Greek, which, by the way, that goes along with his course, and many other Greek resources. He blogs regularly on Greek and issues of spiritual growth. So pretty much, if you go to this YouTube channel, Bill Mounsey, you'll be subscribed and you'll get all these wonderful informative episodes. Even if you don't know Greek, you'll get something out of it if you just don't worry about not knowing the technical issues that are being discussed. Anyway, so this is how his translation of 1 Timothy 4:4 begins, where it says, and nothing is unclean if it is received with thanksgiving. Now let's continue. When you do a little digging, you'll find out that Thayer's Greek lexicon discusses this in a very meaningful way. So the word is pronounced apobletos, Apobletos in English, apobletos. And now Thayer cites this very passage, 1 Timothy 4:4, and he says parenthetically this. In Hosea 9, verse 3, Symmachus, this is an abbreviation for a famous Hebrew scholar who translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek. He wasn't part of any Septuagint. He just did it in the early 200s. Then Symmachus said this word apopletos was equivalent to, and the word is unclean, okay? Unclean in Hosea 9:3. So I decided to pull up Hosea 9:3 and show you unclean occurs here in the verse. I could read the whole verse. They shall not dwell in the Lord's land, but Ephraim shall return to Egypt and shall eat unclean things in Assyria. So this is a period of exile, okay? And so that expert in Hebrew tells you for a fact that the word unclean means in Greek apopletos. So I have to tell you that is considered gold for, in other words, for data mining. What are the meanings of apopletos in Hebrew? Because you have an absolute top scholar, Symmachus, again, a gentleman from the 200s, and I'm going to show you a little bit of his biography here, but you'll see the Wikipedia has a whole article on his life. He dies, he lives into the late 2nd centuries. I think he was also alive in the early 200s. They'll mention he gave a book to a lady, Julia, and so on and so forth. But let's get back to this. So he is the top expert is telling you that this word apopletos translates directly the word unclean. That means that has to have been included in all the definitions and should have been considered, particularly when Paul is talking about food. That's what Bill Mounsey is saying. I'm just going to fix it because I can see this meaning. Okay. Now, Symmachus is this person. Symmachus is from the late 2nd century, or was born in the late 2nd century, or flourished in the late 2nd century. He was a writer who translated the Old Testament, the Law and the Prophets, into Greek. His translation was included by Origen in his Hexapla and Tetrapla. So what Origen did is he took various translations of the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and he put them side by side by side. So we'd have the Hebrew text on one column, Symmachus's translation on another column, then he'd have Theodotion, another Hebrew to Greek translation right next to that. So he could make a comparison of all these things, and he had several of these. And so only the top experts' texts were considered by Origen and put in these columns. I'll show you how overdue was this correction from Joseph Henry Thayer. He died in 1901, okay? Bill Mounsey fixes, I'm going to just say approximately this year because I haven't seen it before. So I'm just going to say it took at least till 2024 till someone paying any attention to it, because every single Bible on Bible Hub, 31 of them, they all have it something else, okay, rejected. But with food, it had to have been used in the same meaning that it was intended originally. When Paul's speaking, he's speaking in the context that people know you're talking about unclean food and you can eat any of that you want. That's what Paul's trying to communicate. And therefore, he is using a term that Symmachus tells us is a direct translation of the word unclean, and the word was apopletos. Here's where that evidence is. This is Joseph Thayer. So he was a top scholar of his day, top lexicon author, and yet he's being disregarded for 220 years approximately. And here's what you'll see. Again, I showed you this already. Now I want to read you all of 1 Timothy 4 so you can just actually see the context. Not all of it, but verses 1 to 4. Now the Spirit clearly says that in the last time some of the faith will apostatize. See, I'm glad that Paul mentions that, because apostasy has a clear meaning in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy 13, 1 to 10. Anyone who turns you away from God's law, a law that is eternal for all generations, it's said 27 times, or everlasting for all generations. Just look up those words, limit it to Torah, and you'll see 27 times. And that person who turns you away from that law is called an apostate. And if they do that, God says you're not supposed to listen to them, even if they have miracles, signs and wonders, healings, snakes biting their hands. I'm exaggerating there, but basically any miracle, sign of wonder, or true prophecy, it doesn't matter. If they turn you away from my law, Yahweh says, then you are to treat them as an apostate, and you should execute them. Actually, it's a death penalty to actually transgress God's word. And that's a serious sin. So he's actually accusing other people of apostatizing, you'll see, by having any food laws. So you'll be amazed how he can do that. Now the Spirit clearly says that in the last time, some of the faith will apostatize by being devoted to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. Well, what are these teachings, Paul? By the hypocrisy of liars. Who's the liar? The other people are liar. You're not lying, right? Of course. Whose own consciences have been seared, forbidding to marry. But the next one is what I'm pointing at. Demanding abstinence from foods that God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who are faithful and know the truth. Know the truth that there's no food clean or unclean anymore. That's what he's saying. Since all of God's creation is good and nothing, odeus, is unclean. Apopletos. There's the word that Symmachus said was used for unclean, and the translators ignored that, or didn't know about it and didn't care what they said 220 years ago. And translation after translation has come out after that many times. Nobody's fixed this until Mr. Mounsey, and he's only done it in his interlinear form and his printed book, but it hasn't percolated yet. But I'm going to hope it gets percolated. If it is received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified through the word of God and prayer. So Paul's actually saying you can take unclean meat that you're not supposed to eat, like let's say meat that's actually God calls an abomination, meat sacrificed to idols. Jesus condemns it 3 times in the book of Revelation chapter 2. He praises Ephesus for rejecting eating meat sacrificed to idols, and he condemns Thyatira and it's escaping me, Sardis, I think it's church at Sardis, for eating meat sacrificed to idols. Okay, so and Jesus says this is a new Balaam, a false apostle is teaching you to do this at Ephesus, and he congratulated them for rejecting the false apostles and not eating meat sacrificed to idols, just to give you more context. But Paul is saying that no, that Jesus has it wrong. I'm sanctifying it. I'm putting a holy ring around all the food that God's created. It's all for good. There's nothing that you should declare unclean anymore. That's apostasy, my friends. And he's turned it around completely. He's making the people who try to tell you don't eat this food, they're the apostates. They're the ones who aren't following God's true higher law. Do you see what's happened here? You have a corrupt mind. The person who's just so far out doesn't even know how far out he is. I don't think he knows where the landing is to get out of this problem. He put himself so far away from God's word. But that's what apostasy is, and that's how you are tested by God. He says in Deuteronomy 13:1-10, that I allow false prophets to come and tell you my law has been done away with, or change my law, or give you a different version of God than who I am. And when you see that, it's there for a test. They'll even use prophecies that come to pass. They'll even use signs and wonders that come to pass, but disregard them when you see and hear that they're using words that contradict or take away or negate my word, this law that I've given you here. And that's this law that is everlasting for all generations, said numerous times, 27 times by my count. I think there's a lot more in the law. And so let's just continue. And then he's directly pointing this arrow of apostasy at somebody and actually saying it's the doctrines of demons, where was that? Deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. See, he's right. Apostasy is deceitful spirits and teachings of demons, but he doesn't realize it points right back at himself. But by pointing it at others, unnamed others, he's able to deflect your attention. And the Gentiles are dumb. We're all dumb. We don't know this is apostasy on the face of it, right? We're just dumb. And it wasn't translated. We could ever see it because the word unclean was not here until Mr. Mounsey finally showed us what Symmachus said. And that's why Thayer said it's the right translation for this word apopletos, obviously in relation to food. Let's continue. All right. So I just want to show you what's odd here is Mr. Mounsey doesn't show you Thayer's translation, doesn't give you any of that. He tells you what its normal meaning is: to be cast away, meant to be condemned, regarded as vile, 1 Timothy 4:4. But yet he has down here, it's unclean. His own concordance has it's unclean. So somehow what he knows is from Thayer, just to get back to this. So what he should have done is said, take this information and put it in his lexicon, but he didn't. So you would be mystified. Why is he doing this? So just to give you a little heads up. And again, if you go through all the books on BibleHub.com, you'll see it's a 31-0 wipeout in favor of not using what Thayer said over 100 years, 120 years ago. Okay. So, but as a result of this, if you looked at this and you would have no idea, no conception that the word here could have been translated unclean. So absent Bill Mounsey's unwitting exposure by just telling us matter-of-factly that it was the word is unclean, who could possibly have suspected the radicalness of Paul, that he would literally take a law eternal for all generations and wipe it out? I leave this episode, I want to just show you what Paul is saying. In essence, is the apostles and the Bishop James are following the doctrines of demons, right? Because watch what they're going to say. James is the Bishop of Jerusalem, and with Peter and the other apostles, the true 12, are present. Peter, who Jesus said, whatever you say on earth will be bound in heaven, and he's agreeing on this decision. This is what it is. We will write to them, the Gentiles, James says, to abstain from things polluted by idols, that's eat meat sacrificed idols, from sexual immorality, from things strangled. So in the law, animals that have been strangled should not be eaten. There's probably a good reason for that. Their anxiety level goes up and they release a lot of hormones when they're being strangled. Nor can you eat, and you cannot eat things that are from blood, meaning the blood inside of animal meat, which, by the way, scientifically we now know it's toxic. The heavy iron in meat, unlike in plants, is toxic to human beings and should not be eaten. And it's very unhealthy, and it's the cause of a lot of diseases and cancers. Now they know that, but they didn't know it. But by the way, the USDA cleans with 3 washes all meat that you eat at the market with ammonia to kill the hemi-irons toxins inside of it. But unfortunately, they cannot kill the blood inside the meat that way, inside the muscle of the meat. That has to be drained or somehow removed by pressing, which is what Hebrew delis will do. They'll press out the meat of the blood, and that's the only way you can eat it and not violate God's commandments and also protect your own health. Okay, so, and by the way, a lot of people never read the final verse there, so I'm going to read it because maybe people forget this. So this is the only commands they were going to follow? No. If you go to Shabbat each week, what are you going to learn? There's a reading each week, so that's what James refers to. So he's going to say, I'm limiting it to these things. I'm not going to burden them too much, is the prior verse. I'm not going to give them too much now. I'm going to give them these things. And it says, for Moses has had throughout many generations those who preach him in every city, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. Is explaining why, in essence, in the prior verse, he didn't give them a whole long laundry list of things to do. He didn't want to overburden them, is because he knows they're going to hear the law read to them weekly. And because Moses has been read as part of the synagogue service every week. So what did he expect? That a good Christian, a good follower of Christ, would be attending Shabbat would be attending a service where they would hear the readings of the law, and that was done on Shabbat in that tradition of that time. So we have a real problem here, is that we don't have any idea that these commandments, according to Paul, the food commandments here are disregarded completely, even though they're right here on the page. And he says that they're doctrine of demons, and it's apostasy to actually try to follow God's law about this. No, it's the reverse. That's a doctrine of demon and apostasy to say not to follow these. That's the truth if you follow Deuteronomy 31-10. So Paul has a completely reverse. No wonder Christianity is so backwards. We're the opposite of what we're supposed to do. And thank goodness Luke preserved how the church originally viewed everything. It's the opposite of Paul. And no wonder Paul had such a difficult time with the 12. All right, God bless. Take care, everybody. Ciao. Bye.